Hi, I'm Wendy Turner, Executive Director of Michigan Public. You might have heard that public media is under threat. You're not wrong. But I come to tell you that your voice has power. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org, contact your lawmakers, and take a stand today.
This is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark. My co-host, Rick Pluta, is deep in it today, preparing for tonight's State of the State address. You can tune in this evening at 7. That's when you can join us for Governor Whitmer's 7th State of the State address. After the speech, Rick and I will be joined by Speaker of the House Matt Hall and Senate Minority Leader Eric Nesbitt for a live Republican response. And then Democratic House Minority Leader Ranjiv Puri will join us for his thoughts as well. That is all happening again tonight at 7 right here on Michigan Public. So in the very chamber that Governor Whitmer will give her address at the Capitol will be Republican State Representative Jim DeSana. DeSana has introduced a resolution that would turn the body that he sits in, the state legislature, into one that is part-time. DeSana says he thinks lawmakers don't need as much time as they take to do their jobs. In fact, he says lawmakers waste time. Now, doing something this big, it would actually need to amend the state constitution. In order to do that, DeSana's plan would need a 2/3 majority vote in both the state house and the state senate. And even if it got through that long shot, it then still would go to voters to be put on the ballot for Michiganders to decide. So again, a heavy lift. But I wanted to talk to DeSana still, because what he has to say as a sitting lawmaker about the way that Lansing is operating right now is pretty illuminating. Representative Jim DeSana, welcome to It's Just Politics.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Zoe.
Is there something that you are now in your second term, is there something that you know that we don't about how Lansing operates that you think voters should understand about just how much time it takes to be a lawmaker?
Yes. So we set a record, as you probably are aware, of Michigan State historical record for the fewest amount of session days in Michigan history in the last legislature. We don't take a lot of time in session, and then there are committees, obviously, and then there's legislators have work with constituents that their staff do. But for the most part, we have a lot of extra time on our hands, and I believe that we should be like 40 other states out of the 50 that have part-time legislatures.
So I have covered Lansing long enough to have seen this part-time legislative idea introduced before. I am remembering 2013. That was the Committee to Restore Michigan's Part-Time Legislature. Then again in 2017, when then Lieutenant Governor Brian Kelly tried to make his gubernatorial campaign all about making Michigan a state with a part-time legislature. And each time they failed. So let's go through some of the reasons why folks have been opposed in the past. One is they say, look, Michigan is one of those states with a full-time legislature because we are a populous state.
I would say that so is Texas. So is Florida. In fact, a lot larger than us. Texas and Florida are doing quite well economically, financially, and they get their business done with part-time legislatures. And if you look at the states that have full-time legislatures, New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Massachusetts, Ohio, California, oftentimes they're states that have really expensive state governments. Our state government doesn't need to be as costly as it is. And it would also push the legislators to get their work done. We do a lot of waiting around. I know that some people will say, well, deliberate is good, going slow is good. But we can be deliberate and get our work done in the 90 days per year that I have provided in this amendment.
As you well know, state representatives, they represent about 70,000 to 90,000 Michiganders each. State senators, they represent more than 200,000 folks in each of their districts. What would happen under your proposal to constituent services?
So the amendment addresses only the days that we're in session. And obviously, there would be subsequent legislation which would cut back the amount of staff the amount of people that we would need because we would only be in session for about 1/4 of the year. So constituent services would be handled by obviously the legislator. And then also one staff member would be my recommendation would be for each legislator to be able to have a staff member to handle constituent services. So right now we have 2 full-time staffers. And then in addition to that, the House Republicans and the House Democrats have a tremendous amount of staff, close to 100 on each side. And that wouldn't be necessary if we're not in session to the degree that we are. We could save a lot of money with a part-time legislature, but constituent services would not suffer because a lot of your constituent services are handled by making contact with the unemployment agency or with the DNR or with Liquor Control Commission. So a lot of that is handled actually by the full-time people that run the state of Michigan.
Well, but to that point, that's another thing that detractors say, that you are taking the power away from elected officials, elected lawmakers, and giving that power to bureaucrats who are unelected.
I don't agree with that, just based on the models that we're talking about where 40 other states operate like this. And some of these states, the executive branch does have a bit more power, but I have not seen a time in our state where the executive branch did not have as much power as it has right now. So I think those are all arguments that fall on deaf ears as far as the people go. They know that if legislators do their jobs correctly and they handle their constituent complaints and requests properly, you don't need somebody there 8 hours a day, 5 days a week to handle constituent services. I just don't get that many requests from people. They deal with the Secretary of State. They deal with the Attorney General. They have departments that they can call when they're having difficulty with their state government.
So the legislative branch is an equal branch to the executive and judicial branches. Speaker Matt Hall, Republican, he's been talking a lot over the past few weeks about his body's oversight role, being a watchdog over what is happening throughout government, including the executive branch. Becoming a part-time legislature would not just take power away from one branch of government, but would it not also limit the power of the legislative branch's oversight abilities?
Well, let me just give you an example. Here we are at this point. To be quite honest with you, there has been nothing done in almost 2 months out of the year. People are prepping to do things. People are getting committees ready. And people are doing research. But honestly, we've gone 2 months into the year and we're just starting our committee assignments. It's very difficult for me because a lot of my fellow legislators are saying, Jim, quiet down. You shouldn't be telling people that we're not doing anything. And I am the watchdog out there saying, hey, we're not doing very much. We shouldn't be full time. As far as what you're saying about oversight, I really think that the reason that Michigan is so corrupt and has such a strong lobby corps is because we are a full-time legislature. We are there in Lansing for more than 40 more of our brother states. So we're much more accessible to the lobbyists. We're not back in our districts with our people. I think it's more important to be with our constituents, be in our districts, be back home.
Hear that, but I'm remembering again the conversations that I've had with folks when this issue has come up in the past. And one of the issues is that obviously a part-time legislature would most likely decrease pay for lawmakers. This leads to the question of just what kind of folks would actually run for the legislature. Some say the concern would be that it would lead to only the really wealthy running, right? Folks who already have money because they don't need the paycheck. Others say if the salary of being a lawmaker is suddenly $30,000 or something, that means a lawmaker would need to have another job or work 2 jobs, 3 jobs to make a living. Would there really then be the ability to spend time with constituents and concentrate on their needs?
I think there would be, and I think the proof is the 40 other states that have part-time legislatures. It is true. A legislator would have another job, which I think would make him more in touch with his fellow constituents, that he's working a private sector job. And I don't believe that it is just wealthy people that would be legislators. I don't think it plays out that way. Stay-at-home moms could be a state legislator. People who work part-time could be legislators. people who own small businesses where they could hire somebody during the 3 months that they're in session to take their place at the coffee counter or at the lunch counter. And obviously, subsequent legislation would be required to, like if a auto worker or a school teacher wanted to be a legislator, would be to require them to allow leave from their job and be able to come back and resume their job when they're done with their 90 days.
We're speaking with Republican Representative Jim DeSana about his proposal to make Michigan a part-time legislature. Representative, I want to circle back to what you alluded to, or just basically what you said, which is that there isn't much being done right now in this 103rd legislative session that began in January. That has more, though, to do, doesn't it? I'd love your thoughts, with leadership and what the Republican leader or Democratic leader, right now it just happens to be a Republican, has decided is the cadence of Lansing. They're the ones that are putting committees together. That has less to do with whether it's a full-time or part-time and more just about your fellow Republican leadership.
It's possible that a case can be made in either legislature, but it would prove that it's nonpartisan because most of the bills we passed last term were towards the end of the term under the direction of a Democrat speaker. So we tend to wait until the last minute to pass bills because we have time. And if you really understand the legislature in its grand scheme, we've got the budget to pass every year, and we wait until June, late June, to pass it. So we have plenty of time. If you look at when the next election comes, we basically stop legislating for the summer and all into August, September, and October because everybody's running for re-election. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be in Lansing having to make laws when they need to be out campaigning. So this is another really big argument for part-time legislatures. We just don't choose to be in session that much. And the only regulating factor we have is that end of the year, end of the term, where they say, okay, let's quick get some laws passed because we're coming up on basically the buzzer on the clock. Now, when the Democrats came out 2 years ago, they had a very specific agenda. So they had a large amount of lawmaking on their plate. But I think if you look, then we had a huge lull. So right now, if you look at what's passed, we passed laws that fix the tip server and earn sick time credits. Mm-hmm. And we passed a couple of resolutions. That's pretty much it. In 2 months' time, I think this is researchable for most people who might doubt what I'm saying. There really has not been very much done.
Have you brought those concerns to Speaker Matt Hall?
Oh, I've mentioned plenty of times that we should be a part-time legislature and that we don't have our daily activities are not really necessary for us to be there full-time. I think that many of the conservatives in my caucus believe and agree with me, but I also think that there's an inertia in Lansing, kind of a setup group that wants to prove, oh, hey, we're gonna meet, we're gonna deliberate, we're gonna have committee meetings, we're gonna have hearings, we're gonna make ourselves look like we're very essential, right? And I think the people that are here that look at limited government can say this could all be done in a very short period of time. And if we were forced by constitutional mandate to get our work done in 90 days, we would get our work done in 90 days. Really, when you look at it, we have really arguably no more than about 90 days worth of work if we were working full days and getting committee hearings and getting laws passed. The budget is the biggest thing that we have to do every year. We set the state budget. Michigan has too many laws already. We do not need to be making new laws. Some of these laws we passed last term were feel-good, virtue signaling. They really weren't significantly changing anything other than the laws that have no teeth, so to speak. There's a lot of that goes on in Lansing, too, and I'm sure you've witnessed that.
You mentioned the fact that there was this bipartisan deal over the minimum wage, tipped wage, and paid sick leave. There was a February 21st deadline. What would happen if we were a part-time legislature and a deadline like that came up when the legislature was not in session?
So the amendment as written has in it that the governor or the House or the legislature can go into session in extraordinary circumstances. So if there is a need to meet, whether it's an emergency or whether there is a pending issue that needs to be addressed by the legislature outside of January, February, and March, the legislature can call itself into session and the governor can ask the legislature to come into session.
Representative, I can't help but just notice after the many minutes and time that we've spent talking about this, it really sounds to me as though you see a state capitol that just simply isn't working.
It works some of the time and it works part-time. Thus the reason for this legislation. There is some functionality, and it's kind of like, I would liken it to being in college and cramming for an exam. 3 weeks before the exam, you're like, oh, I'm good. I've covered stuff. When you get to the night before, you're going to put in 5, 6, 7 hours studying for that exam. The legislature functions very much like that.
Representative, finally, before we let you go, I need to say that this proposal has gone to the House Committee on Government Ops or Operations in Lansing. Lovingly or not so lovingly, this is sometimes known as the committee where bills go to die. What do you make the fact that this is where your proposal is going?
Well, I do believe that if we polled the public, that part-time legislature would be over 60% approval. This is an issue that polls very high with the public. We're not exactly high on the totem pole, legislators. We're not exactly high, and society doesn't view us especially well. We're viewed as fat cats, living off the public dole, having all kinds of perks, going into office with a certain amount of wealth and coming out of office with a lot more wealth. And I think that's how the public views us. And I think the public needs to view us more as just like them. We're members of society, just like them. And so when we put something off and shelve it, I think we help the momentum for it even more, because they're like, people will say, well, this keeps getting brought up, but guess who the people are that are stalling and not wanting us to decide on it? The legislators, of course. So I would say, why don't we put it up to the people? Why don't we put this question up to the people on the ballot? Let's see what they think. I'm pretty confident that we would be a part-time legislature if this got on the ballot.
And we should note, again, as we did at the beginning, that that's exactly what would have to happen, because this is amending the Constitution. If this were to pass, and it would have to pass in both chambers, it would then go on the ballot and be up to voters to decide on this resolution.
I think that's the greatest way to decide this. We're only voting to put it on the ballot. By putting it on the ballot, we're saying, yes, we'd like this question brought to the people. And obviously, me being a conservative, I'm saying that I'm in agreement that a part-time legislature would be a good thing. But I'm also saying, let's let the people decide. And again, I think that the popularity of this idea is out there. 40 other states do this. So 4/5 of the states in America are doing this. We are in the 1/5 that is not. And I think we need to move over into the other column.
That is State Representative Jim DeSana talking with us today about his plan for a part-time legislature. Representative, thanks so much for the time.
You are most welcome anytime, Zoe.
And that is It's Just Politics for today. I am Zoe Clark, my co-host Rick Pluta in Lansing, preparing for tonight's State of the State address. And we hope you will join us for the address. We will have a live Republican response and analysis of the evening. Again, that is tonight at 7 right here on Michigan Public.